Cek cek satu dua cek tes tes satu dua tiga.
Um, Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our event, the public discussion, and I would like to ask all speakers to come to the front row, please. All speakers. Uh, yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. It is a privilege to welcome you all to our discussion on ECOS of the Bandung Conference, Reinventing South-South Cooperation, and we are honored by your presence and grateful for your participation. So 70 years ago, in 1955, leaders from 29 newly independent countries across Asia and Africa gathered in the city of Bandung, Indonesia, and it was a defining moment, a political awakening, and a collective assertion of sovereignty, solidarity, and self-determination in the post-colonial world. So the Bandung Conference laid the foundation for the non-aligned movement and pioneered the concept of South-South solidarity. And today, as we navigate a rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape marked by shifting alliances, economic fragmentation, and the urgent need for inclusive global governance, the spirit of Bandung remains profoundly relevant to us. And how can countries of the global south collaborate more effectively today? And what lessons can we draw from the Bandung legacy? And what role can Indonesia play, both as the host of the original conference and a growing regional power? So this discussion seeks to explore these questions, and together we will reflect on the legacy of South-South solidarity, examine its current expressions, and imagine its future trajectories. We are fortunate to have with us a panel of distinguished speakers who bring with them a wealth of knowledge and experiences in diplomacy, international relations, and regional cooperation. But before we begin, I kindly remind everyone to silence your mobile devices, and I encourage you to engage actively during the Q&A segment later in the session. And now I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. First, we have Mr. Muhammad Zulfikar Ahmad. who is the director of MENA Indonesia desk at Celios. And we have Ms. Dina Praptora Harja, the co-founder of Synergy Policies. And we have Mr. Tias Baskoro Harwicaksono Aji, who is the Director of Intra-Regional Cooperation for Asia Pacific and Africa at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Indonesia. And then we have Mr. Vikas Maharaj, who is the Charge d'Affaires from the Embassy of South Africa. And last but not least, we have Mr. Gonar Musor, who is the Minister and Consul General from the Embassy of the Philippines. So I think we can begin the panel session right now, starting from Mr. Zulfikar.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And before I commence my talk, I just want to thank everyone for coming today, and especially other distinguished speakers for agreeing to accept our invitation. And I want to thank those who attend this event, especially from the embassies, from international organization representative, and also from the media. Today we gather here to actually, Celios as an institution has been focusing on international relations and international politics as well. And one or two regions that we've been focusing on are China and the Middle East. And the main reason is because China has been, you can say, the most important partner for Indonesia. And at the same time, we are trying to somehow expand our horizon by identifying opportunities available beyond our traditional partner. And that's why we recently launched our Indonesia and MENA desk, Middle East and North Africa, because we believe that the region has so much opportunities to offer for Indonesia. And I think it's very relevant given that Prabowo has recently returned from his Middle East trip last weekend. Today I'm just going to give a bit of introduction next. So I think we have seen that our geopolitical theater, you can say, has changed quite for quite some time, especially with the decline of the role of the Western countries. And of course, since 2010, we have seen the rise of China exponentially, and a lot of countries around the world with the so-called look-east policy are trying to expand their foreign policy by cooperating more and more with the so-called Eastern countries, or now known as the Global South countries. And of course, Indonesia or ASEAN as a very important region, geographically, very strategically located, has so many resources, has a lot of population, has been seen as an important partner for many countries. And Indonesia, as the largest nation in the region, is actually increasingly seen as an important partner for this for this policy of looking east. Of course, the term looking east signifies you know, a particular region. For Australia, of course, it's looking north, not looking east, but you know, it symbolizes looking to the global south countries. And therefore, as I mentioned here, South-South cooperation is not nostalgia anymore. Rather, it is a strategic and moral imperative for countries in the global south to cooperate with one another. Next. and and we can see here that the momentum has grown, and we can see, for example, with the rise of BRICS and with the increased importance of regional cooperation like ASEAN or the Gulf Cooperation Council as well, which reflect a new form of cooperation. And 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 therefore there is a shift from aid dependency to mutual partnership. What it means is that we no longer, many countries no longer, or they want to decrease their dependencies or their reliances on major power countries, and trying to establish more mutual cooperation and co-development based on their shared history and their shared experience. And this has been more intensified with the decline in the Western leadership, which opens leadership for global South-led alternatives. Next. And therefore the South cooperation has evolved from a symbolic solidarity to more robust partnership. And this consists trade, investment, people-to-people exchanges, regional initiatives, South-led funds, as well as banks and policy coordination. And therefore many emerging powers like China, Indonesia, Brazil, India, and South Africa are crafting a new multipolar development landscape. So the geopolitical scene has changed because of this. Next. And I think this will grow even more and more if we look at what has been happening in the recent years, in the recent times, with, for example, the Trump tariffs which recently being imposed. And I think many countries believe that they no longer see the West as, or they see the need now to move away from their traditional partner in the West to seek partnership elsewhere. And not, in fact, for this, not only the South, you can say the global South, but also many countries, including the American allies, are impacted by the decision. And now many countries see the importance of economic diversification and also self-reliance. That, I don't think we are able to rely anymore on certain countries. We have to seek partnership elsewhere. And therefore, I think in the future, this South and South cooperation will grow even further. Next. And we have also seen particularly with the move towards energy transition, with the move towards renewable energy, because Celios has been focusing more on the issue of energy transition in Indonesia, and we've been looking at specifically on cooperation in relation to renewable energy. Take, for example, the JETP, the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which, of course, has been seen as a potential, but yet we see that there are several obstacles for this program to be implemented. And what happened then, many countries then seek, or including Indonesia, try to establish or alternative cooperation for their energy transition, because they see that ZP is not reliable. It's been delayed despite the promise of a big funding. It's been delayed, and some people say it's not reflecting the local context in Indonesia, and therefore we have seen how many countries are coming in with their renewable energy investment to Indonesia, and then Indonesia welcome this with very open hands. We've seen China, for example, has been investing a lot on renewable energy, and then we've seen the countries of the Middle East. The UAE, for example, has promised to invest in the Nantara, for example, on the renewable energy sector. Recently, with Prabowo went to Doha and met with the Emir of Qatar. Qatar has promised to invest trillion rupiah in the Nantara. Among other sectors is renewable energy. So this kind of, you can say a growing distrust to the Western funding, to the Western, to the global power, promises have made these countries then cooperating with one another on the, we can say, south-to-south basis. Next. And then, as I mentioned earlier, global south countries are now, partnering with each other on green cooperation and moving away from the promises of major powers. Next. And then they see that by having, south-to-south collaboration or on grid transition, they see like it's more based on shared experience. I can reflect more on my neighbors. I can reflect more on countries that have similar experiences rather than seeing somehow a top-down approaches. And we can see that the South and South cooperation are now seen as supporting locally driven climate finance, building green industries and knowledge system, and ensuring that transition self-development and not dependency. Next. And then we can see that in many of this cooperation, they emphasize value of equality, mutual benefit, and non-interference. And this has expanded not only in energy transition, but in health sector, education sector, digital transformation, and so on and so forth. Next. And then we have also seen very recently a growing effort by you can say the South countries, the global South, to help each other in the conflict resolution. I'm not talking about Palestinian in particular, but we can see, for example, in 2021, Indonesia decided to partner with Qatar in solving the issue of the Afghanistan crisis after the withdrawal of the U.S. and the rise of Taliban. Qatar, Doha, and Jakarta decided to cooperate in the solving issues in Afghanistan, and we have seen that many global South countries are also trying now to find solution to end the crisis in Gaza, not by any more knocking the door in London, in Washington, or in Brussels, but rather knocking door in the neighbors. Egypt met with Turkey, for example. Prabowo, in his visit to the Middle East, also invoked the issue of the Palestinian cause for, because we see that many countries see now the importance of reducing reliance on global powers and seeking partnership with each other. Next. And I think this is just example. I'm sure a line of speakers here will bring more of their perspective. But I think just for an introduction, I think the objective of today's talk would be trying to understand more about the relevance of Bandung Conference, the relevance of Bandung Conference in our contemporary era, and then trying to understand how we can shape a new narratives and strategies for more effective South-to-South cooperation. Because undeniably, without wanting to be very ideal here, South-to-South cooperation also has limitation, also has the potential now for being not just partnership, but countries within the global South are trying to dominate one another. You know, they're trying to be the leaders in the global South, not based on mutual partnership, but rather on a more dominating way. So I think there are so many homework that need to be done for this global or South-to-South cooperation to continue in the future. I think that's for me, and I'm sure other speakers will bring more perspectives and examples. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mas Vikar, for your knowledge, for your sharing knowledge. I think we could move on next to Miss Dina first. Is that okay? Oh, all right. Okay. Bapak dulu aja deh. Okay.
Oh, thank you very much. My name is rather long. You've heard my long name, but please call me Wichak for short. I'm the director for intra-regional cooperation in Kemlu in the Asia, Pacific, and Africa region. Not the whole globe, the whole world, but only in the Asia, Pacific, and Africa region. In the coming days, I'm only going to be in this position for a few more weeks. I am moving to another place in Africa, in Nairobi, and looking forward to that new posting. But I'm very thankful that I'm invited to share my perspectives on the Asia-Africa, the legacy of the Asia-Africa Conference for Indonesia and for the world, and also as a, as a inspiration for South-South cooperation. So what I'd like to do is just to bring in three big themes for the next 15 to 20 minutes. First of all, I'd like to speak on how the Bandung Conference in '55 laid a strong foundation for the development of South-South cooperation globally. That's the first part. And the second part, I'd like to speak about what Indonesia is doing in the scheme of South-South cooperation. And finally, to look ahead on how we can move to address the challenges that we face with through the South-South cooperation lens. But before I continue, I'd just like to thank Celios for inviting me, and to a wonderful presentation by the host, Mas Zulfikar Rahmat. The angles that he's presented have made me think about what I should also be saying to respond to his very strong premises. But I'd like now to start on the foundation of South-South cooperation, which we believe, started in Bandung. Yeah. Bandung has given three, if we examine the joint communique of the Asian African Conference coming out of Bandung in 1955, it's clear that the conference laid the groundwork for South-South cooperation. Yeah, I see it in three significant ways. First is a shift in mindset among newly independent nations. These countries had moved away from a hierarchical mindset, being a colony, which usually are shaped by the metropole and the colony. That hierarchical relationship and mindset has been shifted to one that is rooted in equality, in independence, in sovereignty. But also during Bandung, the need for peaceful coexistence, and also the respect of justice, as well as for international obligations. These nations also take on their obligations as a subject of international law. This shift is embodied in the 10 principles of Bandung, or in Bahasa Indonesia, it's Dasasila Bandung. Among others, there is the respect of sovereignty and territorial integrity of all nations, refraining from acts or threats of aggression and the use of force against territorial integrity and political independence of any country, and also respect of justice and international obligation. That's the first. The second is that Bandung has also reclaimed agency. That's a fundamental. Another fundamental element is through Bandung, these nations have reclaimed agency. Yeah? While under colonial rule, decisions, of course, are made by the masters, colonial masters. After independence, these nations asserted their right to determine their own path. And the third is solidarity, particularly in the realm of development. As newly independent countries, we at that time sought to break away from the dominated north dominated structure, to rely on our own strength and to work together amongst the disadvantaged to create a better world for us. So based on this solidarity, therefore, South-South cooperation is part of this urge for solidarity amongst these newly developed, newly independent nations. Solidarity is widely regarded as one of the most enduring legacies of Bandung Conference. While the word South-South cooperation is not there, it has not been yet coined in Bandung, in the final communique, but the spirit in other forms is reflected. I just like to quote in the communique, in the economic cooperation, it says, participating countries agreed to provide technical assistance to one another to the maximum extent practicable in the form of experts, trainees, pilot projects, and so on, exchanges of know-how, establishment of national, and where possible, regional training and research institutions. So basically, South-South cooperation in all but name is already in the spirit of Bandung. Now, please, next. These are some of the milestones which we see as starting from the conference, and then the footprints of South-South cooperations have emerged following that. From the non-aligned movement, and then in 61, and then the UNCTAD establishment in 64, whereby the group of 77's group of developing countries was formed. Also, the establishment of the UN Office for South-South Cooperation followed in 74, and so on and so forth, until, in 2005, we rolled out, together with Asian and African countries in Bandung, the new Asian African Strategic Partnership. Basically, also to strengthen South-South cooperation. And fast forward to 2015, a similar call, whereby then it was coined the South-South and Triangular Cooperation, meaning that we devise methods of cooperation amongst the South, but not only amongst the South, but in partnership with third parties, which is international organizations or northern partners. And then together, we try to have projects, fund development programs in a third southern country. So that is what is called the Triangle Cooperation. Colleagues, the second part now I'd like to take you into is how Indonesia takes this South-South cooperation into action. Well, the South-South, in our view, South-South cooperation not only supports development goals, but also plays key role in facilitating market access, in promoting global peace, addressing our shared challenges, environment, natural disaster, you name it. These, in Indonesia's view, these are also reflected in our long-term development plan, 2025-2045, which mandates South-South cooperation be directed towards driving economic transformation and strengthening Indonesia's role and influence in the international arena. Next, please. As an active participant in South-South cooperation, Indonesia's role has undergone a significant transformation from beneficiary country to a donor country, reflecting its growing capacity and also commitment to contributing to the development of fellow nations in the global South. For this, we established in 2019 the Indonesian Aid, which provides development cooperation grants, I think for now around 350 billion rupiah to 58 countries, including Palestine, Myanmar, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and so forth, Fiji. Even before the establishment in 2019 of Indonesia Aid, Indonesia has implemented around 500 development cooperation programs with countries in the Asia Pacific since 1999. through that framework of triangular sometimes, or just bilateral. And around 7,000 participants have benefited from our programs. Besides training programs, workshops, the programs, the Indonesia Aid also provide, for instance, vaccine assistance, humanitarian aid delivered to several countries that face humanitarian challenges. Yeah. This sort of program shows that South-South cooperation is also relevant in supporting peace, but also addressing our common challenges. I'd like to speak about Africa a bit, where Indonesia's development cooperation aligns with the long-term objectives outlined in the African Union's Agenda 2063, and guided by the principles of win-win cooperation. Indonesia engages with African nations as equal partners, with priority areas of cooperation includes in the area of energy, mineral resources, healthcare, agriculture, education, community development, as well as infrastructure. We have carried out numerous programs in Africa, in the fisheries sectors for 10 African nations to support food security. Also, again, the provision of vaccine assistance to several countries such as Nigeria, to Kenya and Zimbabwe. As well as we had managed an executive workshop on developing Tanzania's electronic single window system. In the slide you can see a number of Indonesian companies are already operating in the continent, because we would like to strengthen the economic relations with Africa. And going forward, the South-South cooperation program in Africa are expected to increasingly aligned with the development of mutually beneficial economic partnership between Indonesia and African countries. And now I would just skip this part. This is essentially saying that such cooperations are made bilaterally and through triangular, but also within regional organizations in, say, in APEC, in IORA, in CTI, CFF, and so forth. Now, the last part of my presentation is as we look to the future, Indonesia's ambition is to solidify its role as a donor country in international development cooperation, and also being a prominent actor in the global South. To realize this, we must navigate. We understand now we are confronted with a set of challenges, regional and global challenges, and which I could say one is on the budget refocusing, whereby some traditional donors are shifting their priorities budget-wise inward, or reallocating fundings towards domestic or geopolitical objectives. A stark example is the termination of the US aid programs in an effort to streamline operations and refocus their strategic priorities. So in this case, we must strengthen collaborations among development aid agencies who are still interested in cooperation. Therefore, for instance, Indonesian aid would reach out to AUDA, NEPAT, to JECA, to AFD, to GIZ, and so forth, partners. It allows us to pool resources, avoid duplication, and maximize the impact on countries in the global south. And on US reciprocal tariffs, the increasingly protectionist trade policies, such as the reciprocal tariffs introduced by the US, indeed threaten to reduce market access for many of us, for the rest of the world. These measures disproportionately affect export from emerging markets, curb growth, and also undermined, trade-based development strategies. In this situation, South-South cooperation could be one that supports to facilitate market diversification. This has been mentioned by Mr. Zulfikar earlier, and I totally agree. South-South cooperation no longer is only nostalgic. It's an imperative given the current geopolitical situation and the current challenge that we face. And thirdly, on financing gap and lack of technology transfer, the global south faces an annual of about $4.3 trillion shortfall in sustainable development financing, estimated by the UNCTAD. So many countries still struggle to access affordable, appropriate technologies. But as a key way forward is to strengthen, to take on these gaps and lack of technology transfer, we would look to private sector participation from the global south. Companies, Indonesian companies, and I'm sure many strong companies across the global south can also make way to invest in other global south markets and to share their technologies. I think this would bridge the public-private partnership, can be a way to bridge, some financial gaps and to accelerate technical know-how and transfer of technology. I will end at that, and I'm sorry, I think I've taken a bit too much time, but I give it back to you, Madam Moderator. It's not time yet.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tias Baskoro. We have seen the foundation of the Bandung Conference in 1955. There is equal relations. There is also the Bandung Conference has also reclaimed agency as the Global South, and lastly about solidarity. And we also see how Indonesia really plays a role in the South-South cooperation in today's world, and how Indonesia has moved from just beneficiary to donor country. And simply to say, there is a lot of opportunity for Indonesia to strengthen the solidarity in the SSC countries, right? Okay, I think we could move on to Miss Dina. All right. So the slide, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Shafa. Good morning, everybody. Uh, Thank you so much to Celios for inviting me. Welcome. I welcome the initiative. This is interesting that we have a time to reflect. 70 years have passed. And a bit about myself before I share my points. I'm a political economist by training, but I swim on a regular basis in the diplomatic in the diplomatic arena. So I understand how important it is for us to not only discuss about this reflection from the viewpoint of diplomacy, but which Pak Wicak have highlighted, and to some extent Dr. Zulfikar also have highlighted. I would like to start from the point that multilateralism was actually given a rebirth in the 1955. I mean, we had the UN post the Second World War, but the participation, I mean, the engagements of newly independent countries was, if I say, more as a participants there. But because of the Asia-Africa conference, we have seen the more genuine action of being, multilateralism. You not only participate, you engage, you push for agendas, and you swiftly commit to a format of dialogue. So, and then I'm going to move forward later to the points of looking into ourselves, what have happened in the past 70 years, so that we can take some points of discussions, given what has happened in the past few weeks, what then shall be done by South-South cooperation, by countries like Indonesia and other countries, our neighboring countries, and our southern country fellow. I have a YouTube, by the way, Dina on Diplomacy, which hopefully it's on regular basis 3 times a week. We discuss about diplomacy, different angles of diplomacy, cooperation, and of course political economy. So it's important that Celios highlight this issue of Bandung conference. Okay, the next slide, please. So 1955 Bandung conference. It was, if you look back at this conference attended by 29 Asian African countries, and then it becomes a movement, right? If we just discuss it as such, we think that it's something automatic, but of course it's not. There's a lot of effort at that time to reach that point. So that's what I would like to highlight now. If we notice the Bandung conference, the significance of that time was that it happened under a period of Cold War, where imperialism and colonialism was still eminent. Most countries in the Asia and Africa had no sovereignty. We were poor, very, very poor. We experienced discrimination, we experienced racism and injustice at the global level. So if you think about countries being at that level, you would imagine a lack of freedom, lack of courage, lack of vision, because you don't have all the means that usually is there to imagine otherwise. So it was such a brave and visionary move, actually. Next slide, please. To next slide. To initiate Bandung conference. We lack resources, but yet we manage. This is technical, logistical things, right? 29 countries with hundreds of participants coming in. How do you pay for that? How do you accommodate all of these people? And this is located not in Jakarta, but in Bandung. So you need to travel, commute, even for the kilometers. No, no whoosh, no rail, high-speed train, right? And of course, who is going to finance all of these activities, right? But yet it happened. And then at that time, many countries were not even independent. And now I'm imagining myself as civil society activist. If we invite some human rights activists coming over today, some may not come to discuss because they're afraid when they get home, they may be abducted and then jailed and such, right? But at that time, all of these top leaders dare to defy that situation. They were not only those who were, sugarcoating words, but these are very strong leaders who dare to say exactly what they have in mind against the colonial power. The risk is definitely high, but yay, they take the risk. So what's even more impressive in my view is that they talk about new identity. They offer a non-aligned movement. Identity is something that the order of the imperialism, the order of colonialism, and the order of Cold War. So another aspect, if we look at the process of having Asia-Africa as a movement, next slide, information, right? How was the information being circulated? We should not imagine the days like today, right? Where it's very easy and it's very safe to share information. At that time, any kinds of information being shared will be easily tapped, wiretapped, and then be used against you. So if you become the leaders of movements, you have to really be thoughtful about how you gather information, process it, and then use it to develop solidarity. Because you may form allies, but you may also form adversaries. So at that time, I noted at least two initiatives, yeah? At that time, CIA and KGB activities, because it's a Cold War, they tried to do whatever they can to do covert operation, to propaganda, and to attempts to overthrow governments. So India, for instance, at that time played a significant role in supporting Ghana's establishing the first intelligence service, the Foreign Service Bureau, by Kwame Nkrumah, to avoid some dependency to Western intelligence. In Congo, there was an occasion where Louis Armstrong was used by the CIA to gather information. Louis Armstrong, the musician, the jazz musician, to influence public opinion and undermine the leadership in Congo. So imagine how tough it must be to unite large countries under such pressure. Next slide. Another dimension of how you build solidarity was a very close relationship among leaders. And I'm not saying formal relationship, but very intimate, very personal relationship. Leaders of Asia and Africa connect on regular basis. They meet over Christmas, they meet over lunch, dinner, and then they just fly whenever they can. Sukarno of Indonesia met with many, or have very intimate relationship with Prince Sihanouk of Cambodia, Nasser of Egypt, Nehru of India, even Nikita Khrushchev of the Soviet Union at that time. These are just some of the few leaders. They know each other by name, they joke, they whatever. So it's a very informal and yet very close relationship. Nehru with Nkrumah in Ghana also. So how can you have this braveness? How do you have this close proximity among leaders? Do we have that now? Have we nurtured that over the years, in the past 70 years? If not, what had happened that we didn't have that? So I would like to draw this your attention to this irony. Next slide. of a better off nation. We have improved significantly economically. Since we gained independence, all of us struggled, of course, to reach our wealth. But nevertheless, we have it. And when we talk about the Global South, these are the spread of countries nowadays as the Global South, the South-South cooperation. And this geography didn't have any, geographical scope didn't have any challenge, didn't challenge us during the Asia-Africa conference. But nowadays, we often discuss about distance, how difficult it is, it's very costly, while in reality, it's less costly now than it used to be. So are we facing an irony of a better off nation? Next slide. The G77 was also formed. Pak Wicak mentioned, you know, the transformation until in the UN we have a platform basically, right? The G77. It's a way for all of these developing countries to initiate agendas, common agendas, and then propose it to the UNGA. But what we experience, nevertheless, is the feeling that it's not concrete enough. I think that's the biggest critique of the G77, right? We need something that's more actionable. And so they start building all of these groupings. Initially, this is just a grouping, informal groupings. All of them were just groupings. And then it becomes organizations. But without realizing it, we must have done something that makes all of these groupings didn't connect with each other. So we had common goals. We have complex issues. We need to address real problems. But there's a problem of perceptions that we then didn't quite connect among all of these blocks. I need to highlight this because at this moment later on, we will see how the major powers also ignite the sense of, you know, insecurity that makes us want to hide behind this regional walls again. Next slide. This is just to illustrate the economic side. Yeah, the world has grown richer, but huge disparities between regions remains. This is the data from the 2024 Global Inequality Database. You can see that Europe and North America remains very, very rich over other regions. Southeast Asia, here we are just the second lowest next to Sub-Saharan Africa. So you see there's a very significant gap. And because I'm a people person, I work on labor issues and such, I see that the average income in Sub-Saharan Africa was just a fraction to people in North America and Oceania. So the difference is between 1 to 15. That's a lot of gap. Next slide. And then you see the income growth. Yes, the income growth is significantly also a gap between Southeast Asian countries, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, MENA, to Europe and North America, I mean. And the average world, the black one, the black color, is that low, actually. So you can see the disparity. Next slide. Within the country, within a nation means the people, right? You also see gaps. You see a significant gap. And the biggest gap is, ironically, among the poorest, right? Middle East, Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia. You see that the bar colored yellow is the top 10% income of the population, way high, whereas the poorest, bottom 50%, is the green on the left. So you can see the gap is really significant. So the richest country didn't have this problem. We, on the other hand, have that problem. Next slide. And the world's 10 poorest countries are former colonies located in Sub-Saharan Africa, and they continue to face conflicts, instability, These are the list of the countries. You can see their monthly income per capita is way, way lower than the rest of the world. So what happened, right, to us? I think this is the thing to discuss today. But I would like to highlight one issue also. Somehow, some way, we have a serious challenge of governance. We want to develop through debt. And the poorest countries are global debtors as well. And then the next slide, I also look at the strategy to develop. Over the years, after the import substitution industry period in the 60s and 70s, where we close up our border and become protectionist, now we see the same trend happening again. So we are actually seeing again and again inward-looking foreign policy. Instead of outreaching, like we had in the 50s, we grow inward. Indonesia, for instance, is imposing a ban on the export of raw nickel, for instance, for the sake of downstreaming industrialization, yada, yada, yada. And then India launched Make in India move to strengthen MSMEs, micro, small, medium enterprises. They subsidize agriculture to the point that they don't want to join the RCEP, right? And then Brazil also revived import substitution policy to protect local industries. And the last move, of course, we know, the US also enact protectionism, embargoing all countries of the world. So what is going on? I think one thing to note today is not to repeat the mistakes that we had, and if as much as possible, we flip the tendency that we have nurtured in the past 70 years. Next, look what we have now. We have the Belt and Road Initiative. See, I mean, as much as it's very debatable, yeah, to look at China at this point, but I think what's interesting, China was among us in the Asia-Africa conference. And look at how China reached out to the world. They don't see the world as something to be afraid of. They don't limit their sovereignty talks just among, their territorial boundaries. They see the world as their playground. Plus and minus, of course, there's negative and positive sides. But you see how they create connectivities across the world. And I'm not talking about state-to-state connectivity. This is business to business, people to people. They connect through air, digital, maritime, logistics, trade, name it. All of these lines that we see is lines of money as well as lines of people, lines of connectivity and understanding about different parts of the world. I've visited China last year and several agencies, and I was astonished by how prepared they are to communicate in the languages of the world. They have a foreign service agency who speaks Thailand, who speaks not all languages of Southeast Asian they have, Russia, even Cambodian language. So they want to understand everybody at the very intimate level. Next slide. And this, the United States doesn't like, right? Which is why we have this problem now, the tariff. And Southeast Asia, this is just an example, we were declared the worst offenders. Of course, now there's a 90-day pause, but look at how high we experienced the tariff, way higher than the rest of Asian countries. And of course, this is again a sign of discrimination. So as a closing, I would like to raise these 3 points. Number one, I think we have to be aware of the irony of being better off economically. By being better off economically, we have the challenge of governance. It's very easy for us to be trapped in collusive nepotism, corruption. So we also it's very easy also to lose solidarity with the less well-off. Not only less well-off country, but less well-off among us within our nation. So I would like to propose that we somehow, because this is organized by CELIOS, a civil society organization, campaign for connectivity for solidarity. We already have connectivity. Why don't we have solidarity? This is weird. So what happened? We should campaign for that connectivity through solidarity through connectivity or something like that. Second point, geopolitics have been our enemy because it turned countries inward looking. Every time we face challenge, Asia-Africa countries tend to be less friendly to each other. Even among the leaders, we become very competitive, you mentioned it. We grow bureaucracies so big, but not necessarily institutionalizing the spirit of independent foreign policy. We can say that the debt creates less independence, but I would say independence is a choice, always. You can always have a debt, but you remain independent, and you become smart in managing your debt. But this is not what's happening. So I would like to recall what we had in the past. Informal relationship is key among leaders. Let's push leaders to also have connections with other leaders and also with people. And there's a genuine sharing instead of just growth, growth, growth. Third point, we often talk too much as an economist about production, investment, trade, cooperation, solidarity, but all in different pieces, fragmented information. I call for us not being partial and not to lose sight that all of this are connected. Production, investment, trade, cooperation is done by people. So we need to focus on how we don't leave anybody behind, revive the spirit of solidarity, so we care about the issue of social protection, not just wage, because wage raised like that exponentially, but always discrepancy. And then human rights, so we understand why some people will always be vulnerable and need our help. Thank you so much.
All right, so we have heard from Ms. Dina. So first, we need to remember that the Bandung Conference happened in the period of Cold War, where imperialism, colonialism, injustice at the global level. There's also a high level of poverty in the countries of the global south. And the Bandung Conference are brave and visionary because there is lack of finance during that time. And we also see the challenges faced now by the region in the global south, particularly about the inequality and economic disparity in the countries of the global south, and even the world's 10 poorest countries are former colonies. Most are located in the sub-Saharan Africa. We have also learned that the Bandung legacy is to build solidarity and the need of closeness and intimate relationship among the leaders. And there is also the strategy to develop SSC to nurture the tendency and the solidarity that we have started 70 years ago. All right, thank you, Ms. Dina. I think we could move on to Mr. Vikas Maharaj. Let's hear it from him.
Thank you. I'm Vikesh. I work at the South African Embassy, and I'm grateful to Celios for organizing this event. Speaking about Echoes of Bandung, Reinventing South-South Cooperation. I thought that I will not bring a PowerPoint presentation, as we will sort of channel the spirit of Bandung, where we just had pen and paper. So if my remarks are very different, it's because my typing and my handwriting are quite bizarre. But I think, discussing this topic and hearing what what everyone has said so far in this distinguished panel, I think it's important that we look at what the echoes of Bandung are, especially in the contemporary geopolitical and economic environment. We heard about Bandung being created by 29 countries after the Second World War. And what we see from that is, again, the Cold War, the great power rivalry that we need to look at. And I think we should, as Ms. Dina mentioned, we should look at the bravery of the leaders and see that the Bandung conference was actually a revolution in democracy, in diplomacy. It ignited what we call the third world revolution, where the third world could assert itself. You heard from Pak Wijak the formation of NAM and all the other political entities. We heard about the economic entities that were formed. And this was, again, based on a movement that was persistently looking for peaceful resolutions at the time, looking at moving away from colonialism and from the established order. South Africa at that time was under an apartheid regime. We were not part of the historic Bandung Conference or the creation of NAM. But thanks to the leadership at that time, the brave leadership of some leaders, including the Indian Prime Minister, we were able, as the African National Congress, as a liberation movement, to participate as observers in Bandung. And throughout our 31 years of democracy, we see the NAM, the G77 plus China, and other organizations as valued members who fought for our democracy. And we, as South Africa, we, in 1994, after democracy, in 1998, we, under the presidency of Nelson Mandela, chaired the NAM, which remains a key priority for us for our foreign policy. And our foreign policy in South Africa is marked by this commitment of non-alignment, informed by the principles of Bandung. And the spirit of Bandung, which was rooted in inequality, mutual respect, and shared sovereignty, was a bold assertion that, like we've said, created what we now refer to as the Global South. And it's a destiny that today we confront with cascading crises in the world, from climate chaos to widening inequality, as we've just seen those slides. 70 years on, we still have these challenges of geopolitical dynamics, economic inequalities, and conflicts in various regions of the world, which is made worse by the lack of movement to address old threats, such as nuclear disarmament, and new existential threats, such as climate change. Therefore, this is a reminder that South-South cooperation is no longer a relic or rhetoric, but it should be a blueprint for the future. When South Africa remains steadfast in advocating for its non-aligned, active non-aligned approach, we will continue as South Africa to stand for opposed to anti-colonial dispositions. As we remember, 31 years of genocide in Rwanda, another genocide is currently taking place in Gaza. We reiterate our calls for an end to the genocide in Gaza, the opening of access for humanitarian aid into Gaza and the people of Palestine, and the peaceful settlement to the end of the occupation. Not only the occupation of Palestine, but there are countless configurations around the world, including Ukraine, South Sudan, the Eastern DRC, which are cause for grave humanitarian and health crises, which is causing international instability. We also call for the end of unilateral economic sanctions on countries and an end to blockades which have thwarted the right of certain countries of the South to develop. On the African continent, you heard about Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and South Africa is committed to such. The countries of the world, as we know, are very interlinked and interdependent as never before. We've seen that in the past few weeks. We are linked through technology, trade, global value chains, and international capital flows. We share common challenges which include underdevelopment, climate change, pandemics, terrorism, illicit financial flows, and the threat of the use of nuclear weapons. The lack of concrete progress around nuclear disarmament, however, remains a grave concern. And the unequivocal undertaking by nuclear weapon states should be honored, as it is only through nuclear disarmament that comprehensive non-proliferation may be achieved. Also, we need to look at the globally agreed set of rules based on international law that have been established and which the NAM was based on, and with the UN at the center. Threats to eroding these accepted principles and prescripts of international law should be resisted. South Africa's approach has always been a commitment to multilateralism, as indicated again in various positions. We therefore need, as the Global South, to give dedicated attention to the reform of global governance institutions, including the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, and establish a global system of government that is fair and equitable and has the capacity to respond to the needs of all persons in situations of threat and harm. Nation states, especially in the South, must engage in finding solutions to current challenges faced by multilateralism. The Global South must continue to contribute to the debate on the reform of the UN in general and the Security Council in particular. The Security Council must be reformed as a matter of urgency to reflect global challenges, for it to remain relevant and maintain its legitimacy. And it's important that we understand the UN's legitimacy. We must also give meaning to the principle of sovereign equality. We've heard of moving forward with unity in the Global South and broader multilateralism, but we must move beyond the rhetoric of this. Solidarity without action is just rhetoric. And as I indicated, South Africa is focused on the principles of Bandung. And as we, as South Africa, take over the G20 presidency, which has been led in the past by 4 countries of the Global South, South Africa holds this presidency based on its themes, again on Bandung, solidarity, equality, and the new challenges of sustainability. We build not only upon Indonesia, Brazil, and India, but also on Bandung, moving to the future. Through solidarity, we create this inclusive society on people-centered. Solidarity will allow us to develop our societies in a way that reflects our shared humanity. In our interconnected world, the challenges faced by one nation impacts all. When we promote equality, we are striving to ensure fair treatment and equal opportunities for all individuals and nations, regardless of their status, geographic location, or any other characteristic. Sustainability clearly involves meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. South Africa therefore presidency takes place in the world that is facing overlapping challenges with mutually reinforcing crises, which are climate change, underdevelopment, inequality, poverty, hunger, unemployment, and technological challenges. So while these challenges are common, we've heard and we've seen that these causes and consequences are unevenly divided. Part of the paradigm shift therefore requires G20 countries to situate inequalities at the heart of economic policy making. Inequality poses a significant threat to global economic growth, development, and stability, thus creating disparities. Inequality and its consequences are especially evident in the Global South. A lack of predictable and sustainable financing for development and climate action exacerbates these inequalities. This is worsened further by polarized ownership patterns of critical resources for development, extreme vulnerabilities to pandemics and other global public health emergencies. These challenges are difficult to overcome, given crippling sovereign debt levels that force many countries of the South to sacrifice their developmental objectives to service unimaginable debt. And that comes to the choice of independence over debt. To tackle this global polycrisis, South Africa believes that it needs to redefine partnerships. We need to take action to strengthen disaster resilience and responses. As the increasing rate of climate-induced natural disasters is affecting countries around the world, with a devastating impact on those countries that cannot afford the cost of recovery and rebuilding. Secondly, we must take action to ensure that debt sustainability for low-income countries are manageable. We must therefore address the key question of the cost of capital. Thirdly, we must mobilize financing for a just energy transition, as was earlier raised. This would include strengthening multilateral cooperation, looking at streamlining support for country platforms such as the Just Energy Transition Partnerships, and a more effective leverage of private capital. Fourthly, we must work together to harness critical minerals for inclusive growth and sustainable development. We've seen that mineral extraction accelerates to match the needs of the energy transition. It's crucial to ensure that countries and local communities endowed with these resources are the ones that benefit from it. Therefore, in consideration of this, South Africa's G20 presidency will be looking at inclusive economic growth, industrialization, employment and reduced inequality, food security, artificial intelligence, data governance, and innovation for sustainable development. Working towards these goals is a clarion call for action, that we are not merely remembering Bandung, but we are reinventing it to fight with ideas, innovation, and activism while building alliances and not bridges based on mutual respect and not dependency. Let me be candid for a moment. No one will cede power willingly. The UN Security Council, Bretton Woods institutions, and tech monopolies will not reform unless they are compelled. Bandung succeeded because it united the marginalized into a force that cannot be ignored. Today we face the same choice. Will we answer that call? I am convinced, as you've heard, that there are formations such as the BRICS Plus, the New Development Bank, CIVETS, the E7 emerging countries, or the Next 11 and SIDS. This is the part that we should use to looking at South-South cooperation, rather than the rhetoric of conferences that we usually have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vikesh. So 70 years later, after the Bandung conference, we still have the same challenges, particularly about economic disparity. So it is time for the South-South cooperation to strengthen the solidarity and to still voicing issues happening all over the world, not only for the economic benefits, but also for the humanitarian crisis, as there are many countries that are still facing sovereignty issues and are under operation. And there is this quote from Mr. Vikesh: solidarity without action is just rhetoric. So it is really important for the South-South cooperation to strengthen their solidarity again. So we could move on to our last speaker, who is Mr. Gonar Musor. The floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Gonar Musor. I'm the CDA of the Philippine Embassy. And first of all, thank you very much to Celius for organizing this forum. So as we celebrate this year, the 70th anniversary of the Bandung Conference, which Indonesia hosted in 1955, we also reaffirm our commitment to the spirit of the Bandung Conference as embodied in the first Asia-Africa Conference and to the South-South and Triangular Cooperation. We also recognize and highlight how these frameworks have helped shape the way we work towards our shared goal of economic and sustainable development. It is a privilege to share with you today the Philippines' perspective on South-South cooperation, a vital framework for collaboration among developing countries, grounded in shared experiences, mutual respect, and a collective aspiration for sustainable development. For the Philippines, South-South cooperation is not a novel idea. It is a long-standing pillar of our foreign policy and development agenda. We have always believed that developing countries, by working together, can achieve meaningful progress grounded in shared experience, mutual understanding, and regional solidarity. It is indeed a powerful expression of solidarity, a demonstration that the countries of the Global South, much like any other group of countries, can drive progress through mutual support and shared innovation. In line with this, we see tremendous value in partnerships that bring together a wide range of actors: national and local governments, the private sector, the civil society, academia, and international organizations. This cooperation plays a key role in advancing our development priorities, deepening regional integration, and promoting global equity. So allow me to share some of our recent engagements that reflect this commitment. So starting with in our own backyard, as a sign of our commitment to support fellow nations in their aspirations towards nation building, in November 2023, the Philippines reaffirmed its support for Timor-Leste to become, in its bid to have full ASEAN membership. So this is a concrete example of how we use our own development experience and helping our neighbors achieve the same development goals. In October 2024, just last year, the Philippines convened the International Conference on Women, Peace and Security under the theme Forging Collaboration and Convergence for Advancing Women, Peace and Security. So this high-level gathering in Manila highlighted the importance of gender-responsive peace building and reaffirmed our commitment to ensuring that women are not just beneficiaries but active agents in peace and development across ASEAN and beyond. In November 2024, we participated in the 6th Asia-Pacific Directors General Forum for South-South and Triangular Cooperation in Bangkok, contributing to discussions on resilient and sustainable urban development and sharing our experiences in community-based DRR, or disaster risk reduction, digital governance, and local innovation ecosystems. In our region, the Philippines has been proud to host and contribute to key ASEAN and Asia-Pacific engagements. And also this is in preparation for our upcoming chairmanship of ASEAN next year. So we hosted the 3rd ASEAN Digital Ministers Meeting in January 2024, focusing on digital cooperation, cyber resilience, and bridging digital divides across ASEAN. Another one is the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the sorry about that. So the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, held in October 2024, also in Manila, which provided a platform to lead conversations on localizing disaster resilience and ensuring community-driven adaptation. Last February, we co-chaired the 21st meeting of the High-Level Task Force on the ASEAN Community Vision 2045, where we advanced strategic discussions on regional integration, connectivity, and the future of ASEAN's community building efforts. These engagements reflect how the Philippines is actively contributing to South-South cooperation, not just through policy, but through dialogue, action, and regional leadership. Our approach to South-South cooperation is organized across several priority themes. Number 1, capacity building and technical exchange. In our ministry, we have this office called the Technical Cooperation Council of the Philippines, or TCCP, which have through the years supported projects across Asia Pacific and Africa. So from sharing expertise in disaster resilience to training in business process management, the Philippines contributes where our strengths can help others succeed. So, unlike more developed countries, the Philippines, of course, cannot give aid via financial means, but what we can do is to provide capacity building, given that, in the Philippines we have an oversupply of qualified professionals. So I think by providing technical support to fellow developing nations, we are able to project what we would like to call one of the soft power assets of the Philippines through South-South cooperation, giving technical assistance to our neighboring countries. Second is environmental sustainability. So as an archipelagic nation vulnerable to climate change, the Philippines champions ecosystem protection and resilience. We are an active member of regional initiatives such as the Coral Triangle Initiative, which is based in Manado, partnerships in environmental management for the seas of East Asia, as we continuously promote environmental stewardship as a key pillar of South-South cooperation. Third is economic integration. So we have these infrastructure projects such as the Samar Pacific Coastal Road, the Panay Guimaras Negros Island bridges, which were developed with the support of partners like South Korea, And it demonstrates how South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation can deliver inclusive and sustainable growth. Fourth and lastly, global advocacy and governance. So we actively participate in platforms such as the Colombo Plan and the Forum for East Asia Latin America Cooperation, or FIALAC, which promote cooperation in areas such as agriculture, renewable energy, and governance. We also proudly co-chair the group of friends of the voluntary national reviews of the United Nations. And we've seen through the past, through the previous interventions of our panelists, we've seen that many of the existing multilateral and regional organizations right now, owe their existence to the Bandung Conference. It was mentioned, the non-aligned movement, even ASEAN in itself, the BRICS, even UNCTAD. So, so many of these organizations owe their existence to the legacy left behind by the Bandung Conference. So while we recognize the transformative potential of South-South cooperation, we also acknowledge the challenges that remain. Middle-income countries like ours still face barriers to tailored financing and capacity support. Institutional constraints also limit our ability to scale initiatives quickly. But along with these challenges also come opportunities. We must continue to invest in digital innovation, climate adaptation, and multi-stakeholder partnerships. These are areas where South-South cooperation can truly thrive and deliver impact. Moving forward, the Philippines will continue to champion inclusive, practical, and resilient cooperation. We will expand our technical assistance programs, strengthen our regional partnerships, and advocate for the deeper integration of South-South cooperation into the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. We believe that the Global South is not just a community of emerging economies, it is a pathway and community of innovation, resilience, and solidarity. The solutions we develop here are already having a lasting impact around the world. The Philippines stands ready to contribute, to learn, and to lead where we can alongside our partners in the Global South. So before I end, I would just like to emphasize some points. I think more than just remembering the legacy of the Bandung Conference, I think there's also a need to redefine the concepts that we have been playing around during this discussion. Of course, before, when Bandung Conference was convened, it was labeled as the Third World Conference, or the third World Revolution. But now, some countries may find the concept Third World as not really politically appropriate. Like in the Philippines, for example, we would like to label ourselves as a middle power, for example, or a middle income country, because Third World may sometimes have that colonial sense of colonialism. So, and then of course, even the concept of Global South, because for some, Global South might be seen as an oversimplification of a very diverse group of countries and economies. And right now, many things have happened since 1955. Many of those countries that were supposedly part of Global South, namely China, and even in ASEAN, for example, like take the case of Singapore. Can you really is it really proper to label them as one? And dealing with foreign policy, I think we also have to be sensitive when it comes to the nuances of foreign policy. So I guess these are the things that we need to ponder on in order to at least assess the importance or the significance of the Bandung Conference. Because I think part of, more than just remembering, I think we need to also evolve how in certain aspects of the discussion in order for us to be able to adapt to the changing realities that we face today. So maraming salamat po. Terima kasih.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gunnar Musor. So for the Philippines, South-South cooperation is not a novel idea. And we also hear that the Philippines plays a progressive role to ensure unequal development throughout many events and dialogues on the capacity building and technical assistance in the South-South cooperation ecosystem. So we will wrap up the panel session, and we would like to open the floor for questions and discussion. So if you have any question or comment or arguments, please feel free to raise your hand. And we kindly ask you to introduce yourself first, your name and your institution, and someone will fetch a mic for you. Thank you.
Halo, selamat pagi semuanya. My name is Prodita. I'm the CEO of the Conversation Indonesia. I'm really happy to be here and to listen to these amazing presentations from the panelists today. As I sit here and Ibu Dina's presentation really brought us back to 1955 and reminded us of how courageous all the leaders were at that time. And I also, in my mind, what was happening is these Davids against Goliaths, and they just step up and show up and kind of fought their fear to take their agency. But at the same time, I'm also thinking about what were the conditions that made these Davids be there, you know. There was World War II. Europe was kind of rebuilding itself. The US was becoming the world leader and really consolidating their power. And I think a lot of the new independent countries were able to actually embrace their independence also because of the changes of the global order at that time. And now what I'm looking at the moment is that the remnants of that consolidation of power back then is still around here, of course. As you see, in the UN, it's not an equal. There's a lot of power imbalance. There needs to be this reform in the UN Security Council. I want to ask the panelists of your analysis of the current power imbalance that's happening now, not just in the economic sense, but also in the military sense. Because there's permanent Security Council permanent members, they have nuclear weapons, and it seems like with countries that have military might, whatever it is, whatever the code, the human rights code, they would just disregard it because they have that power. Who would want to, who would dare to fight against them? So with this question, I want to ask: what can middle powers who don't have these weapons, who can kind of build our power to fight this really real power imbalance in the world? So that's my question.
All right, thank you. I think we could answer it first.
Thank you very much, Pradita, for a very provocative question. This is a question that has been in the minds of practitioners, diplomats, for over 4 decades. We have the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which gives different rights to the 5 countries who originally owns nuclear weapons, and a different treatment for others. I mean, that is the treaty that is now in place, being signed on by almost all nations in the world. That treaty calls for also the disarmament, a work towards disarmament. And this call has been a centerpiece of the moral force of the Global South, the non-aligned movement in pushing towards total disarmament of weapons of mass destruction. Although the efforts of decades, the struggle to rid the world of nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction continues, yet the owners, the possessors of nuclear weapons would not in themselves relinquish this very precious a weapon. You can see also that those who have implemented, well, faithfully or not faithfully, the NPT for the use of nuclear for peaceful purposes have also been, constrained in using their right, to develop this technology for its development. So on the other hand, the obligation of nuclear powers towards nuclear disarmament is been ignored. And yet, on the other hand, restrictions to those who have abide by their, abide in using nuclear energy peacefully have sometimes been made even difficult in using that right. So I suggest, this countries will continue to push for this through the, the Global South, through the non-aligned movement, and so forth. South Africa, Indonesia have been a stalwart promoter of this position of ridding the world of weapons of mass destructions, along with almost all of the non-aligned movement countries. But we alone as countries are insufficient. With us are the strength of civil society. But even with the amalgamation, or with the working together of nation states and civil society, still the call to nuclear disarmament is unheeded. So, but what I would suggest is to continue this moral push. Imagine how many billions and trillions of dollars to sustain a weapon that is we hope will not be used at the expense of this amount of money being used for the purpose of developing for the developing world. So I guess we're in this struggle for decades. It's not really changed anything, but a coalition of nation states and civil society will at least give, moral leadership towards this cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradita. Good to see you again. We met many years ago. I just realized we met when I was still a dean. Yeah. Okay. Your question about what made David exist. Any braveness comes because you love beyond yourself. I think one of the things that I don't see happening often nowadays is love to humanity. You love yourself, but not necessarily other humans, right? And why? Because you don't even think about sharing what you have. Your mindset is all about accumulation, accumulation, accumulation of, wealth for yourself. So I see numerous kinds of contradictions, actually, debates ongoing. Like, I cannot help but thinking what we are facing is actually leading to the peak of capitalism that is going to get worse because of this trade war. We are going to see in the developing countries the inundation of products from countries that are rejected by the US but will continue and insisting to produce, right? So in the logic of capitalism, other countries are markets. They don't see them as friends in a genuine sense like we had in the 50s, but we look at them as markets. So we see, there will always be this dilemma, which I don't think anybody, it takes leadership for us to recognize this dilemma. Number one, between accumulation versus distribution. If you want to do solidarity like we had in the 50s, we have to refrain from just accumulation. We have to distribute. Social protection, human rights, caring for the left behind, minority groups, those are distribution. And then, for the sake of weapons, you care about humanity or you care about science. Science can also be very dangerous because all of this is also for the sake of you develop new thing, you explore curiosity of all the scientists, you can develop something that's unmanned, and it can be very dangerous. It turns out all of these good things that we imagine, unmanned vehicles can be good to for deep sea activities, for instance, but ended up very dangerous for developing countries because we don't have the means, but spies are everywhere nowadays because of that weapons. And who knows what's hanging out in the orbits, because of this race for technology of satellite. So science versus people, also an issue. So capitalism that we see today, produce, but unequal production, filled with trade, to the point I think we have to start questioning ourselves, are we doing trade for the sake of our people, or this is just for the sake of like forced buying? You have to buy as low as possible at whatever cost, that we create what Mas Zulfikar mentioned earlier, waste and exploitation of the earth. We continue producing and yet we don't know where to place them. We don't recycle enough. I mean, even if you do recycling, how much can you recycle with all of this consumption level that we are forced to do? So this is a very timely moment actually to think about solidarity. Your question about what made David exist is really very good, because love for humanity, passion for sharing is not there. Actually, if you think back in the 50s, there must be a dilemma, right? If we want to align with the US, this will be the consequences. If we want to align with the Soviet Union, there will be a consequences. But we somehow felt at that time as developing countries, we will never prevail in any blocks, right? So do we feel it now? Do we have such dilemma now? If yes, then we have to do something else. We have to create a force beyond this two forces that the world is trying for us to choose from. It's another form of dilemma, not Cold War, but this is trade war. And whenever you place affix the word war behind it, it's very devastating. So that's something for us to I guess, think about, and we have to move now. So unfortunately, that's why I talk about our leaders. Our leaders nowadays are still in their comfort zone. They're still tend to appease themselves and say, it's okay, it's just a slight declining of growth, right? That's fine. We can still buy products from the US. That's fine. We can still work with China. It's like, wake up, people. Wake up. We are not in the same zone anymore. You're not going to repeat the same mistakes, would you? Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Pradita. Pradita is my editor for my article in the conversation. I just want to answer the question of power imbalance or power asymmetry. Why the world is still having a power symmetry. And we have to understand there is a very interesting article, if I'm not mistaken, published in Foreign Policy that power imbalances come from psychological need of human beings. It's part of our human nature, not only in the geopolitical setting, even in the classroom setting. You know, whenever we make a grouping, we need to find a leader. And now, looking at it at the global level, of course, even at the regional level, we always try to find leaders, right? ASEAN, for example, always, Indonesia as the largest nation in ASEAN, always claimed to be the leader of ASEAN. And then talking about other regional grouping like the Gulf Cooperation Council, for example, Saudi Arabia always claimed to be the leader of the GCC. But then, when we look at it, I have this kind of theory that it's not always, power asymmetry is not always happening because the powerful impose their power. But also sometimes it's because the less powerful feel that they are weak against the powerful. And that's why this power asymmetry exists. Let me take an example, and of course, because my expertise is on China, I would like to give an example of China. If we look at the Belt and Road Initiative, for example, we always believe that, I want to take an example of Indonesia, for example. In my opinion, Indonesia's response to the Belt and Road Initiative always like, we need China. You know, whatever China say, we need China. And to my opinion, this is the reason why, for example, Prabhu signed the joint statement with Beijing in November. I think part of the reason is because Prabhu feels that any China to realize all of this program, either the free meal program, the housing project, and all those investments. But then, because we always believe that we need China, then we open ourselves to China without any sort of like a regulation and commitment. We are not, we've been doing a lot of study on Chinese investment in Indonesia. And we found that a lot of agreement between Indonesia and China is tend to be asymmetrical in a way that Indonesia is always opening itself. And we compared Chinese investment in other countries, for example. We recently met with the embassy of Peru. In Peru, for example, Peru is very highly dependent on China. But in none of Chinese investment in Peru using Chinese workers. This shows that any country is able to negotiate with China. But I see that Indonesia has not been able yet to negotiate with China for the reason that we always see ourselves in need of China. So then there is an asymmetrical, you can say imbalance where we feel like, oh, China is dominating us and so on and so forth. But my argument is that it's true, but it's not always, we should not always blame the powerful. We need to see ourselves. You know, you ask what the global South countries can do in the face of this power imbalances. In my opinion, is number one, to realize that we have a bargaining power in front of those the powerful. And for example, and just to give you an example, in 2017, the Gulf, the Middle East was in a crisis, the Gulf crisis. Qatar, a very small country, decided to have its own foreign policy, and then Saudi Arabia decided to blockade Qatar, right? The UAE decided to blockade Qatar and Bahrain and so. What happened? Qatar feels like, yeah, it's okay. I need to have my own independent foreign policy. It's okay. We're being blockaded now. We would find other alternative partner, and they found it found Turkey. So from this we can see that even small country can somehow face the powerful when they feel like, oh yeah, I can do it. You know? The problem now is that many countries in the global south feel that they always need the powerful. And that's why there is this, in my opinion, the power asymmetry exists, because not only the powerful imposing their power to the weak, but also because the weak always feel that they are inferior to the powerful. That's in my opinion.
Thank you. I think it's a very complex and multi-layered question. And to answer what emerging countries can do, I think let's take a moment. Let's sit back. Let's chill out, and you figure it out. Recently, you had this tariff war that we are speaking about. Who's the war between? China and the United States on tariffs. If you can name five countries on the global south that decided on retaliation, it'll be very hard. None of the global south countries decided to retaliate. They sat back, relaxed, and what was the end result? A 90-day pause. Sometimes we have to move away from the sloganeering. We have to look at the realities of it. If you look at the Trump tariffs, if you look at it on my country, for instance, yes, it's going to have a devastating effect. But 90% of the critical minerals that we export to the United States are still zero tariffed. There's only 10% of the stuff that we export to the United States, which will have a devastating impact on our economy. But it's only 10%. That 10% can go to the African continent. It can go to Asia. It can go to other parts of the world. We might have difficulties finding new markets in the short term. But then we, as the Global South, we've been asking since Bandung. Bandung was because of a bipolar world. The United States, the Soviet Union. Now we've got the United States, China. We've been asking for a multipolar world. So the multipolar world has been given to us as the Global South. Let's make use of it. And when it comes to nuclear non-proliferation, the security of a few states cannot be because of the others. Look at what's going on in Europe right now. We had the US, we had the Soviet Union, we have all these countries in Afghanistan fighting a war in Afghanistan. It was far away from Europe. Now there's a conflict in the Ukraine. The concern is those two countries have nuclear weapons. Something is going to happen. Do we really have to concern ourselves in the global south about a nuclear fallout in Europe? Just as they didn't care about the fallout in the eastern DRC, the fallout in South Sudan, they cared about the mineral resources. So sometimes we need to stop the sloganeering and just take a step back and say, we as emerging powers, we do have the power. We need to know how to use it. Conferences are great. Multilateral conferences are great. Going together, talking about just energy transition is great. The funding is with us in the South. We can do those things. We just need a different mechanism, a different platform. We need to look at a different way of doing things. I think what's going on now with this isolationist policy of certain countries, a trade war, anti-dumping, etc., has created a huge opportunity. We always say we should learn from history. We usually don't learn from history. There was World War I, there was World War II, and everyone's talking about World War III. We could have prevented all of those things. We had the League of Nations, we had the United Nations. I'm now thinking, what is the third iteration of this global peace that we're going to talk about? We have to look at history as a basis, but we have to move on from saying, again, the slogan of we have to learn from history. No, we have to create a new history. We have to create a new chapter. So there are opportunities that's been created right now. And as middle powers, emerging powers, global south, however we define ourselves, we must define ourselves as creating a new world order, a different world order, a world order that we're going to bequeath to the new generation. So we cannot talk about sustainability, but yet continue flying military aircrafts all the way, building a military defense complex, trying to create more military hardware. And we are not going to sustain this society. So let's look at creating something as middle powers, creating a new language. Like I said, the UN is not, no one is going to give up the veto power. There's no other country is going to come back and say, we're going to give up the veto power. No, and they're not going to give it to other countries. Tech monopolies are not going to change. Bretton Woods institutions are not going to change. Therefore, we've created the New Development Bank. Therefore, the G20, therefore we've created BRICS to counter certain organizations. So we need to find a new paradigm, and middle powers can do that. They can do that. We should not see the global south and the global north. What we should see is as equal societies. There shouldn't be G20, there shouldn't be G77. We all should subscribe to the United Nations. We should all subscribe as equal nations in a new paradigm. I think that's what we need to do. We need to take a paradigm shift and say, these reforms may or may not come, but we cannot sloganize for a long time. We need to change the narrative. Thanks.
I'll try to answer this quickly, just to have more time to get more questions. But for me, taking off from what my co-panelists said, I think it all goes back to redefining what is the spirit of the Bandung conference, and borrowing the word used in the title of this public discussion, reinventing South-South cooperation. I think right now, this provides an opportunity for middle powers to really define what they would like to call as an independent foreign policy. This concept actually has been used in the Philippines, even in the case of President Prabowo. He also used the term having an independent foreign policy. I think this should be the time to define for each one of us what is really the meaning of independent foreign policy. And this was not discussed during the interventions of the panelists, but much has been, the focus has been on the multilateral side. But I would also like to focus on the bilateral aspect of it, because in the context of the Bandung conference also, from a bilateral point of view, this was also the time when the Philippines, in the spirit of being part of the non-aligned movement, or being part of the not allowing ourselves to be either defined as either pro-West or pro-communist, but given that our previous history with the U.S. as being a former colony, but during that time, that was the time when the Philippines also established its relations with the Soviet Union, and we started establishing the diplomatic representations in many of the countries in the aligned with the communist world. And in this case, for example, given what's happening right now, I think this should be the time for countries also to redefine their alliances. We have discussed about Asia and Africa. But we also need to include Latin America, which is also another bastion of developing economies. And in the case of the Philippines, for example, we have yet to fully maximize Africa. For example, we're now trying to add more embassies in Africa and hopefully in South America. These are two portfolios that I previously handled in the Foreign Ministry. And we have a lot to do in terms of maximizing. And I think that's answering your question. That should allow middle powers to be able to adapt to what's going on right now, to be able to redefine its alliances, to be able to explore other countries wherein it may be able to get the support that it needs and be able to avoid that power asymmetry that was mentioned a while ago. I think that would be my advice for middle powers like us, to redefine what is really an independent foreign policy and realign those alliances in order for us to be able to adapt to this chaotic world that we are finding ourselves in. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I think we could move on. Anyone else want to ask question? Okay.
Good day, everyone. My name is Christopher from the Philippines. I am a recipient of Indonesian government scholarship program known as the Kemitraan Negara Berkembang, or KNB scholarship program, where recipients are from developing countries from Asia to Africa, as well as Central and Latin America. Now I am writing a research article regarding the KNB scholarship program's role in redefining Indonesia's soft power and global South knowledge production. And based on my findings, this scholarship program exemplifies the South-South cooperation and the Bandung spirit by providing academic support to financially disadvantaged scholars from developing countries, which is also being given by a developing country, Indonesia. This also serves as a platform to decolonize the global knowledge flow and global knowledge production by utilizing scholars' traditional cultures and Indonesia's local wisdom, and instead of just relying on the knowledge being imposed and taught to us by developed countries. My question is, how can we leverage this kind of tool for South-South cooperation and decolonization to make it sustainable, especially now that there is a budget cut for this program, unfortunately making some applicants not able to apply and have the chance to study here in Indonesia, because I firmly believe that the KNB scholarship programs is not just for the betterment of Indonesia and its soft power, but also for the development of the global South. Thank you.
I can say that this program is indeed in line with the spirit of Bandung, and that's why Indonesia has given birth to programs such as this. It is indeed an important part of our foreign policy, and in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we seek to continue this program and even to expand this program. Of course, we must, reflect on the priorities of the government, and we must make adjustments. But I think this policy of providing scholarship to fellow scholars from the developing world will continue. Of course, at some point it will go in fuller steam, and at some point we will have to adjust. But I think the trajectory of this policy will continue. I think I will stop at that. Thank you very much.
Just a bit, because I was a leader in one of the university before. Actually, if I don't know how the scheme of this scholarship looks like, but technically any university will run on a fixed cost anyways. So you can always slip in a few students, and in return they would contribute something to the university, and then combined it with programs like homestay or something. So it's more subsidized kind of stipend rather than grants that you usually get, right? So there are many ways actually to secure the program despite efficiency. So hopefully you can always discuss with university leadership and think about possible ways to maintain this excellent program. Thank you.
Okay, I think we could have some more questions from anyone? One? No? All right. I think we could end today's public discussion. So we've looked back at the spirit of Bandung Conference, and we've seen how its message of solidarity, of equality and cooperation among countries of the Global South is still important today. And as Sukarno had said in his speech in the Bandung Conference, he said that to speak is easy, to act is hard, to understand is hardest, and once one understands, action is easy. So I hope we all live with fresh ideas, renewed purposes, and a shared commitment to building stronger connections between our countries. We look forward to continuing this dialogue in future sessions. Thank you everyone for being here, and have a great day. Thank you. One more thing, we have lunch over there, so if anyone want to have lunch, please.